Hello there, Reason people! Pooh Bear here, and welcome to my channel. And today we're going to be talking about Reason 10.3, and we're going to be talking about the improvements. And we're going to be talking about the improvements actually in rack extensions as well as VSTs. And what I'm going to do at the very end of this presentation, I'm actually going to tag a little bit on about hyper-threading, because I've noticed a lot more people are starting to talk about hyper-threading, especially with the improvements that are coming along. And I just thought I'd give you a layman's term exactly what that's about. So, first of all, I'm just going to quickly go over my different setups. I've spent quite a few weeks, obviously, beta testing 10.3, but literally over the last, it probably seems like 72 hours, it's been like 3 or 4 days, I've been really doing the performance testing, and I've been using a number of different setups. I've got an old machine, which I built like 10 years ago. I have a laptop over here, which is a gaming laptop. It's quite a reasonable laptop, and I've also got a high-end system as well. But when I've been running the tests, I've run the tests several times so I can take the mean, so I can get all the average, and I'm not just going, oh, this is the best test, this is the worst test. No, I'm averaging them up, I'm looking at my systems, and I'm making sure I'm trying to configure them to get the best level results. It's not to get the best results, I want the same results across the board. So hopefully when I run the test every time, I get back the same results. Unfortunately with Windows, there's always something, little thing going on, so you still have to take that sort of scenario into consideration. I'm going to call this my marketing slides, and these next few slides are going to be a little bit marketing, because I'm doing something which I don't like to do, which is give out stupid percentages. But this is what people are doing at the moment. To me, they're shouting out these marketing slides. Oh, look at this, on 10.3 I can run 65 respires. Not only that, I'm running 65 respires and I'm playing a 3-note chord on all 65, and I'm running this pads. And so if you go to the pads directory called Big Sounds PDO2, and that is a massive sound, yeah. And this is what I refer to as my marketing slide. Let's try and put this into context. How many can I play on 10.2? Well, I can play 28, and on 10.3 I'm playing 65. It's a massive difference, and you're going to straight away say, look at that improvement difference. That is a real thing. I'm not tricking you. On 10.2 I can only run 28, on 10.3 I can run 65. However, and it is a bit of a however, and yet an increase of 132%, is the buffer size. I'm running a 2K frame. Now you're going to hear me reference the word frame a lot when I'm talking about this. I'm going to be talking about 64 frames, or I'm going to be a 1K frame. I am talking about the buffer size, if you didn't ever heard of the frame terminology. So we're talking buffer size when I reference that. So yeah, 132%, yeah. Right, let's give it a buffer size of 64 frames, and this is the native way Reason 10.2 runs. It runs its audio internally in 64 frames, and this has always been, and this is the issue they're resolving. So with 10.3, they're whatever you set your audio card buffer size to, they're actually internally making the audio frame size the same. So I can run 26 respires on 10.2. I can only run 33, so it's not that big jump, but don't sniff at this. This is like 7 more respires I'm running, and it's the same frame size as 10.2. So in a way, I look at this just by going to 10.3, and this is this is a rack extension we're even talking about. I'm able to run 7 more for the same thing, which is 64 frames, and that is an increase of 27% just by looking at that. On my laptop, I can only run 1 respire. That's the same patch, so on my laptop, that's all I can run, with a buffer size of 64. However, 10.3, I can only run 2. But actually, percentage-wise, that's 100%. Whoa! So it sounds really great. And if we actually go to a buffer size of 2K, you can see, again, I'm only running 1 respire, and I can run 6 in 10.3. Yeah, that's an incredible amount. Yeah, 600. Yeah, marketing sticks, they'd love that. Look at that, 600% increase. But let's get realistic again. If I actually turn on hyper-threading, and actually it's not just hyper-threading, it's hyper-threading audio rendering, And again, throughout the rest of this video, when I talk about HT, I am talking about hyperthreading audio rendering. So I'm not really talking about hyperthreading and disabling, enable it in the BIOS or anything like that. We're talking about the setting within the preferences. I can actually run 5. So 10.2 can run 5 with hyperthreading enabled. And 10.3 with hyper enabled is only 6. Yeah, so it's not a massive difference, but it's still an increase of 20%. Yeah, so, and this is, and you're going to see it throughout my presentation, hyperthreading in most of the tests I do and everything I do actually gives a worse performance than it on and off. So there's certain circumstances it might work for you, and others it won't. Obviously, when I increase the buffer size up to the 2K frames, okay, I've 10.2's actually ran one more, and 7 again it's ran one more. That is an increase of 16.6%. So again, it's not to be sniffed at. So let's get on with some real benchmarks. Now, the first 2 benchmarks I decided to pick on were actually again to do with, well, in fact, it's to do with stock devices within inside Reason, and I'm using the Reason Talk benchmarks. They've been around for years. There's a complex one and there's a simple one. In fact, the simple one is heavy. It sounds like it shouldn't be so heavy utilised on your system, but it's a lot more heavier, and it sort of tests more to do with single-threaded processes. So on my old machine, which I'm always going to point towards the back of the room because it sits in the corner, I ran the complex test. No go. Did not want to play. When I say didn't want to play, it was just and it's totally maxed out, so that's absolutely no good. 10.3, look at this, 12 seconds. That's massive. So anyone who knows these complex tests knows that 12 seconds is absolutely massive. So it took 12 seconds to get me to 6 bars. It's massive. And obviously another further 3 seconds there before I got any clicks and pops out of the actual system. So that's absolutely massive. The only other thing I'm going to say about this system, my old system, is sound card is a little bit dodgy, and I don't believe any of the settings I see on it. So I'm going to refer to this as a sort of a low buffer setting, and I'm going to have a high buffer setting. But to be honest, this buffer setting is actually not anywhere close to your 64 frames. I reckon this buffer setting is definitely more closer to a 1K frame setting. But again, even with a high buffer setting, I couldn't even play 6.2, and we got even better performance, obviously of 19 seconds, which is not playing to 19 seconds. So this is quite an achievement, and we're only talking stock devices here. So if we actually look at the laptop, and the laptop, one thing I will say about my laptop compared to my main system is I actually moved my audio device from one to the other, so it was really like for like, which I like when I'm doing testing, so I've really got stuff which is like for like. 10.2 didn't play. 10.3 didn't play. Yeah. But this is 64 frames. So when we actually increased up to a 1K frame, 10.2 again still didn't want to play on my laptop. As I said, this is quite an intense test. But we got 21 seconds out of 10.3 when I was using the 1K buffer size. And again, obviously 28 seconds before I got to clicks and pops. This is incredible. This is really, 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 really incredible. 21 seconds. As I say, this test is absolutely horror on systems. The complete test actually lasts for 1 minute and 28 seconds. And if you don't know what it's about, basically every bar we're adding instruments in. So it really does build up quite heavy. On 10.2 on my main system, 48 seconds I got out of it before I hit 6 bars. And on 10.3, it completed it, and it gave me a max of 5 bars. And the 5 bars I'm talking about is the DSP barrage you see actually with Inside Reason. So it's only hit 5 bars. And with the 1K frame size, we did get a few extra seconds out on 10.2, and we completed with a max bars of 3. We dropped 2 bars, and these bars are, I've heard it between each bar is about 16%. So this is incredible results, which 10.3 is really coming back with. And as I say, the hyper threading option, it just came out worse than all the tests. It's just a funny one. However, on the simple test, so this is like testing sort of single-threaded processes more. 10.2 ran for 45 seconds, but look at this, 40 seconds clicks and pops before we got to the 6 bars. So this is, you never want to see it this way around. That's the figure you need to look at, because it just starts to become unusable, just the fact that it didn't get to 6 bars. And more likely what's happening is the CPU is actually being really hammered, but it's being hammered so quick that the DSP usage is not actually showing it. And I suppose it's a bit like when we're listening to audio and we've got an odd peak. You know, we're not going to see it on our RMS. It's not going to show us. We need a peak meter to actually see what's going on with the peaks. So it's just happening too quickly. But we did get 5 extra seconds out of 10.3 on this particular one, and on this system on the higher buffer settings. We got a few extra seconds here, like actually nice extra seconds before we got to clicks and pops, because that's the important one. And more importantly, the clicks and pops came after hitting the 6 bars. And the same was true as well for 10.3. We managed to hit 6 bars at 55, and then we started getting clicks and pops pretty much after it, 3 seconds after it. It was pretty close. On the laptop, on the Simple, if you notice, I've got a 40 second with an asterisk, 1 second clicks and pops. Everything, when I can actually see things bouncing around on this one, it was absolutely a nightmare. And it's also true for 10.3. So on this, using the 64 frames, even though I've got 21 seconds where I've got to clicks and pops, which is actually really good if you think about it, things were really bouncing around and out of control. Got a lot better when we went up to our 1K frames. As you can see now, the clicks and pops are coming after the hitting the 6 bars. So at 60 seconds on the 10.2, I hit my 6 bars. And again, it's 5 seconds later on 10.3. As I say, this is a little bit of the Simple test is not something I'm going to worry about. It's testing like a single process, and the final test in a minute, what we're going to see, is the test what I'm really, and you would be really interested in. So very quickly, it got 1 minute 27 before it hit 6 bars, but 30 seconds it started hitting clicks and pops. Absolutely useless, really is useless. And the same again with this one, 140, it's better, but 10 seconds better before it hits clicks and pops. But when again I went up to that lovely 1K buffer size, things started coming back into normal, which is I got a 148 there, but I got a 158 before I got to clicks and pops. That's what I like, and over 2 minutes before I got to clicks and pops on this particular one. So this is the real test. This is to me what I call the real test. I've done obviously loads of individual tests like I did with Respire, and I do feel like it's no point in reporting back loads and loads of difference between different machines, because you've got to mix everything up. So in a real track, that's what this is a real track, and this happened to be called my factory track. I did release it not too long ago, and it's the one with the bottles, if you might remember, in the bottle factory. And in it I've got some 23 VSTs I'm using, instruments. I've got 15 rack extension instruments, and there's 46 other devices. 15, at least 15 I think effects. So the other sort of 30 they could be LFOs, they could be spider splitters, there could be all sorts of things going on there, because I do quite a bit of CV stuff as well. So on the VST front, that particular lush was a heavy lush. I remember when I first started writing this track, it was actually being written on my laptop, and I had all sorts of issues, and I actually had to bounce, and I very rarely bounce when I'm doing stuff, and I had to bounce that lush out because of what it is up to. As you can see, I've got 3 Omnisphere Massive. The modular stuff's doing absolutely loads of stuff I've got going on with that, and obviously I've got an Avenger. And a number of these other devices I think are quite low utilization in the first place, like the Predators don't take up much, and same with the Subwoofer. They really are good stuff. So that's what we've got on the VST front, so we've got quite a bit going on there. On the RE rack extension front, I've got a couple of VK2s, they are quite hefty. I've got a number of Crafts, my favourite rack extensions. We've got some Orbis, and as you can see we've got a few other things going on there. So on my i7, I had to run a slightly cut down version because I just didn't have all the VSTs on that machine. I don't have the licensing for it. But the important thing is, at least I can compare 10.2 to 10.3, and that's the key thing. And the 51 seconds is what I did is, on that particular track, there's a section, in fact, the section where no one's actually ever heard because it's at the end, because I've never actually finished that track. And it builds up over time, over about 51 seconds, and there's 2 massive hits. That's 17 seconds, it really does jump up a lot of instruments in it, and at 34 seconds it jumps up a lot, but there's also a bit of building up throughout. Basically, on 10.2 it failed, it just couldn't run it. 6 bars before I've even hit start. It was no good. 10.3, I got 38 seconds out of it, and I was really impressed with that, actually. Remember, it is the cut down version, so I know I'm not running as many VSTs as we're going to see on the laptop and the main system. But that is impressive. Wouldn't work at all. 38 seconds. And this was the only test when I was using like hyperthreading, it actually improved it. So it actually completed it with hyperthreading on, and I only hit 5 bars max. So as I say, sometimes it's worth just turning that hyperthreading on and off. As a rule, I leave it off because I find I get to clicks and pops quicker, usually with hyperthreading on. With the slightly higher buffer size, obviously 10.3, was able to play 3 seconds before we really hit that top marker, but clicks and pops from the start. So that's absolutely no good. Do you know something? I feel a little bit like a weatherman here. On 10.3, it completed with 4 bars. So with it's the higher buffer size on that old machine. And obviously with hyperthreading again, we got it down to 3 bars. So that's really good. So that 10.3, and this is a big project, and that is really incredible, going from failed to actually getting like 38 seconds, and obviously even here we're completing. Absolutely amazing. So this is the full version, so this is going to be every single VST what we've got going on. 10.2 failed on all buffer sizes, didn't matter what I set it. I even went up to 2K, it failed on all my buffer settings. I couldn't get it to run. It just, put it this way, when I loaded it up, bam, it was just no good. I just couldn't do anything with that. 10.3 also failed below a buffer size of 256. And when it was when I was using the buffer size of 256 and 512, to be honest, it wasn't great, but it wasn't until the 17 seconds when it did just crap out. And remember I said, when I get to my 17 seconds, there's a massive jump at 17 seconds, and another one at 34. So at 1K, at 17 seconds, it got to 6 bars, but it didn't fall over until it hit that next big jump, which was 34 bars. And then I did do a 2K setting. Again, it got to 25 seconds before it hit the 6 bars, but it just couldn't get over the 34 seconds in this particular case. But the important thing is, failed all buffer sizes on 10.2, failed all buffer sizes. And obviously, if you're willing to go up to a higher buffer size, or even didn't really have to go up to this high, would you? Because I got the same 34 seconds in this particular case. That's an incredible difference. And so with all them VSTs and all them rack extensions going on, I'm absolutely surprised. Now, admittedly, on my big beast of a machine, yeah, it completed. Even 10.2, it can complete. Of course it does. I've been writing it. I'm not going to write something I can't run. And I've actually put in a CPU percentage in there as well at 21%. 10.3, and by the way, this is on a 64 frames. I've called it 3.9 bars. Obviously, you haven't really got 3.9 bars, but this was a solid 4. This was really flickering on that floor, which definitely pushed to say to me, yeah, we're nearly there at 4, but it wasn't quite there. And to be honest, you can see it on the CPU. The CPU is a couple of percent less. And also, when you look at these CPU percentages and you say, oh, well, yeah, these are only a couple of percent, actually, you've got to double it. And that's something I'll talk about at the end. So we're talking about 4% difference there. When I increased it up to the 1K mark, we got it down to 3 bars, 23%. And again with 10.3, we got 3 bars, which is the same as the DSP front, but the CPU usage is actually quite a bit lower as well. So the most important thing really you need to take out of this, because I've seen again a couple of people who've written and said, oh, I haven't really seen much in the way of performance difference, is you've really got to look at that buffer size. It's that simple. You've got to look at your buffer size of what you're doing. Yeah, have a little play around with hyperthreading, and we're going to have a chat about that in a second. But the buffer size is the key thing with 10.3, and there is an improvement. It runs a lot smoother, and Yeah, I was quite sceptical at the beginning when I first started testing, and yeah, without a doubt, they've won me over, and I'm really, really happy with the results they've given out. It's been very nice indeed. So as I said, I was going to give you a bit of layman's terms about hyperthreading, because again, I've seen a few threads go out on the forums, and yeah, people are still getting a little bit confused about it. I'm just going to move over a little bit and take a little bit more centre stage at this particular point, because it is going to be me chatting. Oh, bad luck. And goodbye to those who have just had enough. Let me put my mouse down. So I'm going to give you a little bit of techie information first, and then we're going to I'll give you a real nice layman's version of hyperthreading. And the reason I want to give this little bit of techie version information first is because it's semi-important to understand the importance of why hyperthreading came around. And when you look at your CPU and you look at your CPU percentage utilization, and it'll say something like, oh yeah, you're using 40%. The way they get that calculation is they actually use a function to do with how idle your CPU is. So if your CPU says, oh, I'm 60% idle, that means I'm 40% utilized. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if many, many years ago someone said, you can't tell people that you're being 80% idle and you're only 20% utilised, or you can easily say, oh, I'm utilising 20%. Sounds a lot better than saying, oh, you're being lazy, you're only 80% idle. So, but it's an important concept when we actually talk a little bit further about hyperthreading. So let's talk about a real basic setup here. I'm going to go a little bit more centre, there we go. So I'm going to take you and I'm going to be a cashier for you today. I'm going to be a cashier for you. I'm going to have myself a conveyor belt coming down. I've got myself my little till, my scanner, so I'm going to go blip, and I've got one chute where I can actually just throw my food away. So once the food's come down, I've scanned it, I can push it away. Now, there is one simple rule at the moment is there is someone at the other end of that conveyor belt and they've got themselves a big basket of shopping and they're going to be putting on one item at a time, and that conveyor belt's going to whiz it down to me and I'm going to take it and then I'm going to scan it and then they can put another item on, and so on and so forth. I'm a real lazy cashier and I can only process 20 food items in a minute. Yeah, so as the food's come down, I can go blip and I can put it away. Quite straightforward. So if I am doing 20 pieces of food a minute, I am working at 100%. Now, this is another place where people get confused, is when they turn things on and off, or they go from one CPU to two CPUs. They automatically think, well, if I'm working at 100% and I get another CPU, I'm going to be doing 50%. No, both CPUs will be working at 100%. So if I was to, with a little bit of magic, I might be able to do this. Let me see if I can. Whoa! So what we're doing now is we've now each got ourselves a conveyor belt. We've now each got ourselves a scanner, and we've each got ourselves a tube to put the food down. So this is like, a dual CPU. We're both still going to be working 20 food items a minute. I'm not going to say, oh, because he's now around, I'm only going to do 10. No, I'm still going to do my 20. And this is why both CPUs will run at 100%. However, the big difference is by having two CPUs is we can actually get through that food twice as quick. Well, we can process the food twice as quick. We're not going to eat it twice as quick. So that's what dual CPU is. Yeah. So we've got two CPUs. Let's turn that other person off. Bye-bye. So what happens with hyperthreading? With hyperthreading, it's quite straightforward. I've got myself my conveyor belt coming here, but I'm going to have an extra conveyor belt coming down here. But I've only got one scanner and I've only got one output, but I've got two conveyor belts. And obviously at the other end, the rules do apply. They can only put one piece of food on the conveyor belt at a time. And as it comes down to me, I can take one of there, scan it, and I can take one of there and scan it. Now I can see you saying, well, if I'm scanning 20 items already a minute and we start putting food on each, you're not going to be able to do any more work. You're absolutely right. So this is why we can say we can turn hyperthreading on, and you're not going to see a performance gain. If anything, if your system is that utilised, you haven't got any, remember what I said at the beginning? Idle time. I've got no spare idle time. Then hyper-threading actually is going to be a bit of an overhead, because with hyper-threading there has to be a scheduler, there has to be management. Basically there's management above, and when you have management, we all know they cause red tape and they just slow things down. Get rid of the managers, things speed up. However, what I didn't really tell you is the person really who's putting the items on that conveyor belt sometimes might pick up the item, turn it around, and then put it on the conveyor belt. So even though I can process 20 food items in a minute, I'm actually, most of the time, only processing 8, because the other person, the scheduler, has not prepared to get me the food on that conveyor belt. So by having 2 conveyor belts, while that person's doing its little thing, and the same with this person's doing a little thing, they can put their food on, and they've got their food on. So now, if there's only doing 8 and this person's doing like 9, I am processing a lot more food, yeah? I'd be able to get through 17 food items in a minute. And I'm only going to be idle for 3 food items. And that's the whole point of hyper-threading in a multi-threaded system. And by the way, that basket, what they're working from, that would be known as a multi-threaded process, yeah? Because it doesn't matter if it goes on this line or comes on this line. However, I've got a lady in the shop who's got a very small shopping basket, and in that shopping basket she's got, say, some spring rolls and some chow mein and some banana fritters. So she's got a starter, a main course, and she's got a dessert. When she comes down, she wants it processed. She wants me to scan the starter first, then she wants me to scan the meal, and then she wants me to scan the dessert. She is being a single-threaded process, yeah. Whereas my big shopping basket, that's a multi-threaded process. So that's all I really want to say about hyper-threading. Yes, 2 pipes, still only 1 core system and only 1 output. That's the main thing you've got to get in your head. And with a real heavy system being totally utilised, hyper-threading is not going to help. So in a number of circumstances, and you saw in a number of my tests, hyper-threading didn't help. But there's 1 or 2, and it was a surprising one in there, where hyper-threading did help. As I say, it's to make sure that I'm not being idle. The CPU is not being idle. The more utilised it is, the more value for money you're getting. Yeah, you know, it's no good saying, oh yeah, my CPU's only running at 20%. Hey, my CPU's running at 80%. I know I'm getting my money's worth out of that CPU. Anyway, so that does totally end this presentation for that last bit of waffle. And thank you for staying with me if you are at this point. And yeah, let's all enjoy Reason 10.3 when it comes out. And let's hope it's going to come out very soon. So, bye for now.